Hey, what's up guys, DarkArmedDuelist, and today I'm going to be doing some Altergeist test hands. I'm really excited to do this one, guys, because this was actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Jin. And this deck is an absolutely amazing control-based deck, one of the most powerful ones in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because of how it can make use of all sorts of amazing generic trap cards. So, without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name in the description of every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron, along with test hands. And definitely give Jin some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such a crazy awesome deck. So this deck is a really amazing deck because of how it can make use of all of those generic trap cards, and it has some really insanely powerful plays and some insanely powerful setup, especially with some of the new cards that just recently got released out of Brothers of Legend, which we even got an amazing Link for, and a monster that's in the main deck that helps us Link summon even easier into some of our boss monsters, which is really amazing. And you only really have to go for the Link 2 Hextia in this deck, but you can climb into some really amazing Link monsters. This is one of the most powerful decks that came out of Reigns, and I really love the way that this deck basically just makes use of all of those regular trap cards to be able to just control the board and basically just take the win, because you're going to basically say no to everything that your opponent is going to be doing, which is really amazing for a deck to be able to do. So now that we've gotten done pile shuffling, which you guys know that's dad rule number one, you got to pile shuffle or you could brick. We're going to give the deck a quick shuffle and we're going to see what we can actually pull off with this particular deck. Again, this deck does some insane stuff, and I really am excited to show you guys exactly how it plays. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Infinite Impermanence. That's a really good opening card. I will say this deck does like to go first because you want to get all of your setup in the back row, but it can do well second if you do draw into the Infinite Impermanence with a copy of Multifaker, which we're going to draw into a copy of Melusi, a copy of Haunted Rock. You don't want to see Haunted Rock in your opening hand, but this card works really well with your copy of Marionetter, one copy of Imperial Order, and a copy of Melusi. So this is going to be a very easy setup with about 3 to 4 cards that we're going to be able to go in with. So this deck sets up on the first turn very simply normally, and then it just sets up for back row, which is basically the way the majority of control decks play anyways. So we have some really simple plays. So what we're going to do is just normal summon out that copy of Melusi to our side of the field, and then we're going to go ahead and link it away to summon out a Link monster. Since it is a 1-star, you can actually summon out your copy of Linkuriboh, which is going to be the best option for us because we're just trying to get that Melusi in the graveyard. Because this card is super unique, because if this card is sent from the field to the grave, you get to add Altergeist monster from your deck to your hand, which is a really good effect to be able to add any of your Altergeist that you need, while also giving you a little bit of battle protection with your copy of Linkuriboh. So we're actually going to search out from the deck, since we've already normal summoned, our copy of Multifaker, which is going to be our best option to be able to search, especially with all of the different cards that we have in our hand, because Multifaker is single-handedly the best card in this entire deck, and it's just such a good playmaker for all the different plays that you're going to be going into with this particular build. So we're going to go ahead and grab that copy of Multifaker from the deck, and then we're going to go ahead and set 3 cards face down, which is just going to help us out a lot to be able to start controlling the board. So once we pass over to the opponent, we already have 2 essential negates face down with a copy of Multifaker in hand, which is going to give us all sorts of different plays that we can go for, while also stopping our opponent from doing battle damage one time, because we're going to reduce the attack of a monster down to 0 when it attacks while we have the copy of Linkuriboh on the field. So when our opponent goes, you can go ahead and activate something like your copy of your Impermanence to stop the opponent from a monster effect, or you can activate your copy of your Imperial Order, which is going to be another option for you guys as well, because this is going to stop the spell cards that your opponent's going to activate, which this card is such a powerful card for this particular deck. It can be changed out if you want to, if this card does get hit on the list, but there is another card in the deck that you can change it out for, which is a card called Anti-Spell Fragrance, which is another card that's going to be super powerful just to lock down spell cards. So this card is a really good card to basically pay 700 during each standby phase, and it has the ability that negates all spell cards, which is a really amazing effect for this particular deck because we're revolving around traps. Then you have the ability of Infinite Impermanence to stop your opponent. So let's go ahead and just say that we activate the Imperial Order. And once it resolves, you have the ability of your multi-faker that you can roll into, which has the ability that if you activate a trap card except during the damage step, then you can special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is special summon, you can special summon an additional Altergeist monster from your deck and defense position except another copy of itself, but you can't special summon monsters the turn you activate this effect except for Altergeist. So we're going to go ahead and special summon out the copy of multi-faker to our side of the field, and then we're going to go ahead and pick any of our Altergeists from the deck that you kind of want to summon to your side of the field. I usually don't summon out something like a copy of Marionetter because the Marionetter is basically not going to get any effects. I don't summon out a copy of the Pukari, the new card, because this card is going to revive itself when you link summon. So those two cards are kind of out for what we're going to actually go for. I usually go for the copy of Maluseek for a play like this because the Maluseek is going to get me a search as well, which is pretty helpful to just get an additional search. The copy of Sequoias is really good too, but that's usually really good comboed with the copy of our multi-faker to bounce the multi-faker back to hand. So let's just go ahead and special summon out to their field a copy of Maluseek into defense position because we're just trying to establish a little bit of a board so we don't get OTK'd, and you get a little bit more added play later on because the copy of the Maluseek is going to give us an additional search later on, which is going to help us out a lot in the long run of things. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do. So let's go ahead and say we can also activate that copy of Infinite Impermanence to be able to stop the opponent from using a monster effect, and you pretty much got your setup right there with your copy of your Linkribo as well. So let's go ahead and say that our opponent does in fact board wipe us. So this is going to go to the graveyard, and both of these monsters are going to go to the graveyard, but the copy of Maluseek will actually resolve because we're going to get a search from the deck of an additional Altergeist. Now at this point, this is where I grab the copy of the Marionetter because I do have the Haunted Rock set. If you didn't have the Haunted Rock set, you could actually search it, which would be another option for you guys if you wanted to go ahead and search out that copy of Haunted Rock. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for the next play. So for the next play, we're going to go back to our turn, and we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Pukari, which is really good to be able to grab that card off the top because now we can start link summoning really well. So let's go ahead and normal summon out that copy of Marionetter. Once we normal summon out that Marionetter, we're going to have the ability to be able to set to our side of the field any Altergeist trap card, which is going to be really helpful just to be able to set any of those cards to our side of the field. Like a copy of our Manifestation or even our copy of Protocol is really good options. Usually I will grab, if I have a Maluseek already in the hand, I will grab the Haunted Rock because there's a really neat play that I will show you guys that if you did search this card, you could get some really neat plays. But since we already have it, we're going to say, hey, we've already got it, and we're just going to get an additional plus because you can grab something like a copy of Manifestation or that copy of Protocol, depending on which one you really want. I'm going to actually grab, since I already am going to have multiple copies of my Maluseek in the graveyard, I'm going to grab Manifestation because it's a monster reborn essentially. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck now that we've grabbed that card. So the really interesting thing is your copy of Marionetter is actually a monster reborn, if you guys didn't know that. So we're going to do this a little bit interesting. We're going to go ahead and activate the copy of Haunted Rock. That is the ability, if this set card is activated, then you can activate the effect of this card the same turn it was set, which is the really neat thing that you can just immediately activate this card the same turn it was set. And it also has the ability, when this card is activated, you send any Altergeist card from your hand to the graveyard. And when your opponent activates a trap card, then you can send an Altergeist monster from your hand to the graveyard and negate the effect. And if you do, destroy that card. So the copy of the Marionetter has a really neat effect as well, that you can use the effect that you can target an Altergeist that you control and an Altergeist monster in your graveyard, or any Altergeist card that you control and an Altergeist in the graveyard, and send that card on the field to the grave, and if you do, special summon the other card, which is really cool because you can actually send the Haunted Rock to the graveyard after you send your copy of Maluseek to the graveyard and get it basically an additional normal summon because you're just going to revive out the copy of Maluseek by sending the Haunted Rock to the graveyard, which is just super helpful when you're going for a copy of Hextia. Now you have the ability that you're probably going to want to normal summon out your Marionetter down here because of your copy of Hextia, so it will point to it to give it that extra added attack instead of summoning in the middle. I know I usually have that kind of knee-jerk reaction that I want to summon it right here instead of summoning it down here, but when you're playing Altergeist, you want to make sure that you have your Hextia boosted up and in a zone that you can kind of boost up with a monster with the highest attack on your side of the field. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and link these two monsters together because this card can actually link from the hand if you're going to be using an Altergeist Altergeist card to link summon, and we're going to summon out our copy of our Hextia. Now, the really interesting thing about this is the Hextia is now pointing to this copy of our Marionetter, which is going to boost it by the attack of the Marionetter all the way up to 1600, by 1600 going up to 31, which is pretty good. Now, we also have a double effect that's going to activate here, where the copy of Melusine was sent from the field to the graveyard, and the copy of the Pukari was sent from our hand to the graveyard, which you can use once per duel to add it back to your hand, and then the copy of the Melusine will go off because you chain blocked it to be able to add from your deck to your hand an Altergeist card, which is pretty good. I like that effect of being able to add all three of our personal spoofings are right there, but the effect is that you're going to add an Altergeist monster from your deck to your hand, which can be a copy of the Multi-Faker, because now you've already got it lined up with the copy of your manifestation set to grab out the copy of Multi-Faker in just a second, which is pretty helpful to be able to grab that card directly from the deck, because you're going to get an additional copy of Multi-Faker. Being able to use it every single turn is just so good to be able to roll through your cards. And then you also have the Pukari to be able to link summon again later on, which is pretty helpful. I usually like to leave the Marionetter on the field because it does have 1600 attack, and the copy of my Hextia is going to be able to be boosted off of it as well, which is pretty good. So that's the basic play of the way that you actually play this deck. But let me show you guys a basic combo of what I was kind of talking about with that copy of the Haunted Rock. So let's go ahead and just show you guys that quick combo. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck really quick. It doesn't matter what we draw, because we're just going to have two cards in our hand for this particular setup. So what you're going to have in your hand is you're going to have the copy of the Melusine and a copy of Marionetter, because you're basically just trying to get a little bit of a setup with this particular play. So we're going to normal summon out that copy of the Marionetter. We're going to grab the copy of the Haunted Rock. We're going to set that card to our side of the field, which is why this card is so important in this deck, and then immediately activate it to send the Melusine that's in our hand to the graveyard. And once you do, you can then use the Marionetter to send the copy of Haunted Rock to the graveyard, bring back the copy of the Melusine to your side of the field, and then link summon away the copy of the Melusine if you want to go in for an additional play. If you have a Pukari in your hand, you can go for more plays. But you can basically just link these two cards away, summon out that copy of Hextia, and then grab out from the deck another card, like a copy of Multi-Faker, the Pukari. Any of the cards that you pretty much want is going to be the way that you're going to be able to go for it. So basically, you just got off of a normal summon, you got a search and a link too, which is pretty good. Depending on the other three cards in your hand depends on what else you can do, because you might have traps to back it up, you might have additional plays, but that's going to be the basic play of what you're going to be able to do just off of a normal summon of your copy of your Masquerade, or your copy of your Marionetter, which is just really, really good. I really like that effect to be able to just revive a card from the graveyard, and that copy of your Haunted Rock just comes in so handy in this particular setup to get those additional plays. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck again and see what we can actually pull off, and see if we can pull off some crazy cool plays. Let's go ahead and shuffle it up. We're going to go ahead and give it a quick riffle and see what we can do, because this deck does some pretty insane, crazy plays and goes in for some really, really good control-based fields. You won't be OTKing in this deck, but you will be able to set up some pretty good lineups. So let's go ahead and see what we can pull off. So we're going to draw into a copy of Personal Spoofing, which is pretty good. Spoofing is really good because you're going to basically be able to shuffle one of your Altergeist from your hand or your field in the deck and then get a search. Or a copy of Melusine. Melusine is always good to see in an opening hand. A copy of Extravagance, another Personal Spoofing, and a copy of Ash. So we already have a negate in our hand. We have a search. We technically have a double search with what we have, and we have a draw too, which is going to help us out a lot. So let's go ahead, and you got to activate the copy of Extravagance first. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the extra deck and see what we can do. As you guys can see, the deck is basically just going to go in for control-based fields. You're not establishing anything really crazy. You're just trying to basically set up to be able to stop the opponent from going in for all their different plays while we're trying to get out a Hextia on our side of the field. That's basically the bread and butter of this deck, is that you're going to be able to summon out to your side of the field a copy of Hextia and then line it up from there. So let's go ahead and see what we can actually hit. Hopefully we don't hit all three of our Hextias. It would be a little bit of a shame, but you can still play. So we hit the access code, the copy of the memory grant, Hextia, the other memory grant, IP, and a Hextia. So we actually, this is about as bad of a mill that you can get, but you still have some really good cards in the extra deck. You don't want to hit both of these because you only play 2 of these, which if you guys want to check out the deck profile, it is down in the description down below. And then you don't want to hit multiples of the Hexias, but being able to summon out 1 is still okay, but you're going to have to just basically play with that 1. So let's go ahead and draw our 2 cards, which is a copy of our Ash and a copy of Solemn Strike, which is totally fine because we still have plays to go with. It's not too great that we hit the Hexias, but it's still okay. So we're going to normal summon out the copy of the Melusi and go ahead and link it away for a Linkuriboh. Yep, that's what we wanted. We're going to go ahead and link that away. And then once we go ahead and link that away, you're going to be able to search the deck for anything that you want. Again, I like to search for the copy of Multi-Faker because Multi-Faker helps out the most, especially in situations like this where you're going to need the copy of the Multi-Faker to get an additional monster out on your side of the field. And then we're going to go ahead and add that card to hand. Once we add that card to hand, you can basically just set what you have face down, which is the 3 cards. We do have a double negate, which is usually what you establish in this deck from my play testing, which you'll establish like a copy of Solemn Strike and the Ash Blossom, and then the personal spoofing comes in handy as well because it lets you shuffle an Altergeist from your hand or face from field into the main deck to add any Altergeist monster from your deck to your hand, which you can use later on to actually get a copy of Sequoideus in the hand, which we'll show you guys in just a second. So what we're going to do from here is you're just going to leave the Linkuriboh on the field, and once your opponent goes, you can activate the copy of the Solemn Strike to be able to stop a summon, which is going to be pretty helpful just to get rid of a summon. Use the copy of the Ash if you want to after that later on, but you have the copy of the Multi-Faker that can actually special summon itself to your side of the field, and then you're going to be able to special summon out a copy of another monster, which again, usually I like to summon out that copy of the Melusi to my side of the field just to get an additional play, to be able to just go in for all those really, really awesome plays and just basically get more searches. But if you want to bounce back that copy of the Multi-Faker back to hand, you're going to use that copy of Personal Spoofing during your opponent's in phase or during the battle phase, just to stop your opponent from getting rid of your Multi-Faker. We're going to put this back in the deck, and once you put this card back in the deck, we're going to shuffle it up, and we're going to be able to grab another Altergeist from the deck, which is pretty good to be able to grab any Altergeist that we want, like a copy of the Sequoideus, because the Sequoideus is going to be able to go into additional plays as well. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck, and once you actually shuffle up the deck, you can use the copy of the Sequoideus that has a really neat effect that's lets you quick effect return an Altergeist card that you control to your hand, and then target a card your opponent controls and return it to the hand as well. So you can actually get a bounce, which will bounce back the copy of the Multi-Faker to our hand and put the Sequoideus on the field, giving us a bounce, giving us a negate, and then giving us an additional negate with the copy of Ash, basically giving us a bounce and 2 negates, which is pretty good for a setup, if I do say so myself. But then we're going to go into the next turn. If our opponent doesn't board wipe us, that's great. If they do, we still have some plays that we can go into after this. So we're going to go ahead and draw, and we'll do another copy of Multi-Faker, which is actually pretty good because we can actually shuffle 1 back into the deck with the copy of Personal Spoofing, and once you put that copy back, you're going to get an additional search where you can grab something like the copy of the Marionetter, which then can normal summon itself to your side of the field, grab that copy of the Haunted Rock, set itself to your side of the field, and once you actually set that card to your side of the field, you're going to get even better plays because you're going to be able to link summon, which is going to help us out a lot to be able to link summon into some additional plays. So once we normal summon out the copy of the Marionetter, you're going to go ahead and use its effect to be able to then set the copy of Haunted Rock, activate that copy of Haunted Rock, and then it's going to have the ability, if it's activated, you have to send an Altergeist from your hand to the graveyard, which is not that big of a deal to send the copy of the Multi-Faker to the graveyard because we can revive something later. And then you can use the copy of the Marionetter to actually revive something, which can be the copy of the Multi-Faker if you want it to be, because the ability says that if you control a trap card, then if you activate a trap card, then you can use its effect to special summon itself. But it has the ability that if this card is special summon, you can special summon an Altergeist from the deck. So we're actually going to use its effect to special summon it back to your side of the field. And then once you special summon it back to your side of the field, this is going to go to the graveyard. We're going to get special summon an additional Altergeist from the deck, which is going to be a card called Melusi, because Melusi is just going to get us additional searches, which is just going to be really, really helpful. So once we do that, we're going to go ahead and use the copy of the Melusi and the Marionetter on our side of the field to link summon into the only Hextia that we have left in the extra deck, which is not that big of a deal because you still have it pointing towards a copy of Sequoideus, so it is going to boost it up to a little bit bigger than it was. but it does help out to get that card onto your side of the field. Now, you can't special summon anything else but Altergeist for the rest of the turn because of the multi-faker, but that's okay, because all we're going to really need is that copy of Hextia anyways, because now we're going to get a search of an additional monster, which is where you start looking at grabbing a card like maybe the Conqueri, because it's going to help us out a little bit more, because when an opponent's monster declares an attack, if you control an Altergeist card, you can special summon it from your hand, and if you do, negate the attack, which is just going to help us out a lot in the long run of things. I really like to search this card out from the deck because it gives me such additional plays, and it just is such a good card for this deck. But you're going to set up pretty much a field like this and be able to constantly roll that personal spoofing over and over again to get the exact cards that you need, along with the copy of the Sequoias and your copy of Multifaker, which if I had the other Link 4, you could actually go for the Link 4 with this particular setup, which would be pretty good. But the copy of Hextia is a negate as well, because it has the ability that it gains attack equal to the attack of the Altergeist monster it points to. And when a spell or trap is activated, quick effect, you contribute an Altergeist monster this card points to negate the activation if you do destroy that card. And if this card is sent from the field to the grave, you can add any Altergeist card from your deck to your hand, which is pretty good to get you a search. It gets a nice boss monster on your side of the field, and it's just an overall fantastic card. So I think that's going to do it for this particular test hand. Let's go ahead and see what we can do with one more quick test hand and see what we can pull off. Because as you guys can see, the deck does just kind of set up a Link Rebo sometimes. Sometimes it will set up a Link 4. Sometimes it will just set up the copy of Hextia. It kind of depends on what you draw into, and depends on what you're trying to go for your opening hand. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for one more test hand and see what we can pull off. Because as you guys can see, the deck works. I really love the way that it plays, because you're basically just trying to establish on your side of the field a couple of negates and a couple of trap cards. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of a Marionetter, which is pretty good, a copy of Sequoias, Pukari, and a copy of another Marionetter, and a copy of Torrential Tribute. This is a really interesting hand, I have to say, because you don't have as many traps in this particular hand. You have more monsters, which is a little bit weird for Altergeist, but you still have some good plays. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So I'm going to go ahead and normal summon out that copy of Marionetter because I want to get it on the field as quickly as possible. But remember, you want to summon it here instead of over here because you want to have the copy of the Haunted Rock and the copy of Hextia to point to, which is totally fine. So we're going to use the copy of Marionetter, which is going to let us grab that copy of Haunted Rock from the deck, which is going to help us out a little bit to go in for additional plays. You can grab the copy of Protocol if you want, or Manifestation, but since we want to get an additional Hextia on the field, we want to grab that copy of Haunted Rock. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck, and then we're going to see what else we can do. So since this card was just set to our side of the field, we can immediately activate it, and it's going to let us send any of our Altergeists from our hand to the graveyard, which I'm going to send my copy of Sequoias to the graveyard to be able to then revive it by sending the copy of Haunted Rock to the graveyard, which is pretty good to be able to just get that card on our side of the field as quickly as possible to go in for additional plays. Now at this point, we're going to go ahead and link these two together and summon out the copy of the Hextia, which then will grab the copy of the Pukari back to the hand, which is going to be pretty good, but you again can only use that effect once per duel. And we're going to set face down the copy of Torrential Tribute, because if our opponent does for some reason summon more than one card that we don't want to deal with, we can use the copy of our Torrential Tribute to board wipe, which is pretty good. Along with the copy of the Marionetter we have in backup in the hand, and the copy of the Pukari, which will essentially get us into an additional Hextia during the following turn with a set card, is pretty good. Because at this point, you can just basically pass against the opponent, negate a spell effect, and then if they don't do anything, you can basically activate the Torrential when they summon, and we're going to send this to the graveyard, which will get us a search, which is pretty good to be able to have the ability to add any Altergeist card from our deck to our hand, which can be a copy of our, where is it? The Multi-Faker, which is going to be helpful because we have the copy of the Marionetter in our hand to be able to go in for those additional plays and go in for additional crazy follow-up plays. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck and say, hey, we just board wiped our opponent. They passed back to us. Let's see what we can do for our next hand. So we're going to go ahead and draw, and we're going to draw into another copy of Multi-Faker. Again, we don't like that many monsters in this deck, so this is a really weird one. So we're going to go ahead and normal summon out the copy of the Marionetter. Marionetter is going to have the ability to kind of do the same thing that we did before, but I'm going to go ahead and set, this time, I'm going to set a copy of Manifestation because I want to be able to get that monster reborn later for the additional plays to go ahead and get some crazy cool plays later on. So we're going to go ahead and set the copy of our manifestation to our side of the field, and then if you want to, you can link summon with the copy of the Pukari if you want to go for that route, or you can basically just attack with this since your opponent's not going to have anything, which would be a little bit helpful to be able to go in for a little bit of damage. But basically that's going to be your setup. So let's go ahead and say that they do board wipe us, and we activate the copy of the manifestation. We'll just target an Altergeist in the graveyard and special summon it in attack position, but if you do, equip it with this card. So we're going to summon out the copy of Hextia back to the grave from the grave to be able to get it on our side of the field, because it's going to give us additional searches. So we're going to go ahead and draw from the deck for our next turn, activate the copy of Pot of Extravagance. We're going to shuffle up the extra deck really quickly and see what we can actually hit with this, because we're going to go ahead and go 3, and we're going to go ahead and go 6 right here, and we've got the copy of both of our Memory Grams and both of our Hextias again, and we're going to go ahead and draw 2 here and see what we can do. So let's go ahead and send that to the grave, but we did get the anti-spell, which is pretty good, and we have the copy of the Multi-Faker that we can actually special summon out with the copy of the manifestation if you wanted to go that route before you actually drew the cards, which would have been pretty good. So that's pretty much how the deck works. It's pretty easy to play Altergeist, in my opinion, the way that they play, because basically you're just trying to establish a couple of negates with the deck to be able to get out your copy of Hextia and then just take the win, because you want those trap cards set to your side of the field as quickly as possible, but you also want to get a really good Link monster setup so you can go in for additional plays. But basically you're just going to summon out your copy of Hextia all the time, and your copies of your other Link monsters are all utility for the deck, which is basically the way the deck plays. So anyways guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can come part of Notification Squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description down below. And thank you so much, Jin, for suggesting this deck, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.